Right. It looks like we're slowing down on the number of people joining. So in the interest of time, I think we'll get started. So good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Angela Alberti, and I'm a co-chair of the Committee on the Concerns for Women, and I'm thrilled to welcome you to our inaugural fall event. Before we begin, I want to take a minute to share a little about the Committee on the Concerns for Women, which is one of 5 staff-led Harvard-wide employee resource groups, or ERGs because Harvard loves its acronyms. We began at Radcliffe College and have existed for 45 years at Harvard, and our membership is open to all Harvard faculty and staff of all genders and gender identities. We're led by an executive committee of 19 members, all of whom have the CCW background on their screens, and we accept applications for the executive committee each spring. Our mission is to improve the professional and academic experiences of women at Harvard, and we provide opportunities to learn and network by hosting an annual calendar of events, both on campus and online, like today's event. We build community and share information via our monthly newsletter, and you'll see a QR code on our slides that you can use to subscribe. I think that'll be at the end of the event. We represent community concerns and ideas at the university level, and I hope you'll share your ideas via the survey at the end of today's event. And finally, last but not least, we support and advocate for women's mentorship and leadership at the university. And speaking of women's leadership, I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Blair Kahn, to introduce today's amazing speaker and moderators. Blair?
Thank you, Angela. As Angela said, I'm Blair Kahn, co-chair of the Committee on the Concerns of Women, and I work at Harvard Business School. So thanks so much for joining us for this event, Leading with Purpose, Lessons from a Trailblazer. It's my privilege to be introducing Sara Bleich, the inaugural Vice Provost for Special Projects at Harvard University, Director of the Social Sciences Program and Professor at Harvard Radcliffe Institute, Professor of Public Health Policy at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and a faculty member at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. With more than 180 peer-reviewed publications, she is a policy expert and researcher who specializes in diet-related diseases, food insecurity, and racial inequality. Prior to this, Bleich served in the Biden administration as the Director of Nutrition Security and Health Equity at the USDA. Sara holds a BA in psychology from Columbia and a PhD in health policy from Harvard. I'd also like to mention that we have 2 executive committee members who will be moderating this event. Barbara Delalis is head of communications at the Institute for the Study of Business and Global Society at Harvard Business School, and Nora Delaney is senior director of communications at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. The agenda for today is remarks from Sara, moderated Q&A, and then we'll ask the audience to engage. So please ask your questions in the chat and raise your hands. And with that, I will hand it off to Sara.
Thank you so much. It is great to be with all of you today. What I wanted to do is actually take you all through some pictures, give you a sense of who I am, and then would really love, once we get to the open Q&A portion, would really love to hear from you, and I mean that sincerely. So be thinking about your questions. I see a lot of familiar names who are here, so thank you all for joining. And let me just make sure that you all can see my screen. Yes, you can see it. Great. Okay, let me get to the right view. Okay. So I have spent the past 2 decades in food, nutrition, and policy research. And the way that I found myself there was back when I was doing my PhD, which was here at Harvard. And actually, I started in 2002, so 2 decades ago. I was really looking for a topic which was big and complex, so I felt like I could make a contribution. I wanted something that really touched historically underserved populations, but also touched everyone, so it had a lot of policy relevance. And I wanted something that would allow me opportunities to work domestically and internationally. And it was obesity then, but it has now expanded to food, nutrition, policy, and it really hit all those boxes. But I wasn't just motivated by those professional interests. I'm also very motivated by my personal background. So the picture on the left is me and my mom's dad, so that was my grandpa, he was a corn farmer in Maryland and left school after high school so that he could go and help his family in the cornfields. When I got into Harvard, it was a huge deal for him. And one thing that he said to me before I moved up to Boston is he said, Sarah, don't go up there and get uppity. And, what he essentially was saying is don't go up there and forget who you are. And it was advice that was a bit in one ear and out the other at the time. But then it came time for me to pick a dissertation topic, and I was being pushed to do something that I didn't really understand. And I went into public health because I'm very interested in practical real world solutions. And his words came back to me. And that's really the primary reason why I have landed on food nutrition policy. And then on the right is my dad's dad. And he's a radiologist, was a radiologist in New York, and would tell me ever since I was little, he called me Sarah dear. And he would say, Sarah dear, academia is a great profession for women. And he was right. I have been in this space for over 2 decades, and I have really enjoyed it. It has created enormous opportunities, particularly as a mother. The other thing that's important to know about my background is I'm from inner city Baltimore, grew up in a working class neighborhood. This is a picture of me on the left, my brother in the middle, and my twin sister on the right-hand side. And it was taken about 1.5 miles from the house where I grew up in, where my parents still live. And I remember being a little kid and looking around the neighborhood and just thinking that a lot of kids didn't seem to have much opportunity. What I have come to understand as an adult is that it is not talent that is in short supply. It is opportunity that is in short supply. And so one of my North Stars has always been, how do you help historically underserved populations to achieve a better quality of life? I also made a point to show this picture whenever I was presenting as a Fed, because my parents, who were both public school teachers, when we were growing up, we received SNAP, which used to be called food stamps. So it's money to buy food. We also received WIC, which is a program for moms and their children up to the age of 5. And we received school meals. So for me, it was an enormous privilege then to go into federal government and to work on the very programs that I benefited from when I was little. And then, like many of you, I've got little ones. So these are my little one, Cecilia, on the left. She's a double-digit number. She's 10. And then Natalia, who's on the right, she's 12, soon to be 13. So I'm close to having a teenager. And I'm sure, like most of you, having children is the hardest, but also the most rewarding part of adulthood. I've been a single mom for the vast majority of their lives. I'm actually getting married this summer, but for most of it, I've been a single mom. And so it's tricky. It's a lot to balance. And I just have always really tried to prioritize them and what they need, while also trying to stay true to, what makes me happy and how do I make sure that I can try to do both at the same time. Dirty little secret is you can't do everything, but you can do everything over time as long as you space it and prioritize it. At least that's how I feel. So I left Harvard, went to Hopkins, and spent about 6 years on the faculty in the School of Public Health. Loved it, became sort of the go-to person on food nutrition policy, and started getting antsy. I wanted to understand, well, how does the sausage get made? How does government work? So this was in 2014 when I started applying to programs. It was very morally aligned with the president at the time, President Obama. And at the same time, First Lady Michelle Obama had a campaign called Let's Move to reduce childhood obesity. And so I applied, had the great fortune of getting into the White House Fellowship, and really went into government to understand, what is the role of science in policymaking? Is it as big as people make it seem? The answer is not entirely. How do I not just do this sort of government work on the side, but how do I jump in with 2 feet and really try to understand it? And then finally, what are the soft skills of leadership, the intangibles that you can't learn unless you observe really successful people? And so it was hugely eye-opening. Here we are with President Obama. I was in a class of 16 fellows, and between us, in the beginning, we had 16 children. Now we have many, many, many more. Here we are with First Lady Michelle Obama, and I had the privilege of working partly on her team around Let's Move, which was the childhood obesity program. So that was great. And so the nice thing about being a White House fellow is they invite you to all these fun events at the White House. And so I can't resist showing you. So top left is Natalia when she's about 4, shaking hands with the skeleton. Here's little Cecilia trying to trick or treat from a guy on a ball who's juggling and doesn't understand why he can't give her candy. And you can't see it, but he's laughing. This middle picture. So I take my children inside the White House on a tour of the East Room. And they lived and still do live for hide and go seek. So I turn around and I can't find them. And I have very high energy children. So I'm looking, and I find them hiding under this table in the East Wing. And so I took a picture, and then of course, I told them they can't run off or whatever. But I look back at this picture all the time because, people try to act so fancy when they go to the White House. But if you're a kid, it's just a great place to play hide and go seek. And then, here's Natalia on the right, the Easter egg roll, which was super fun. So this picture here is, so now fast forward, I leave the Obama administration, return to being a faculty member at Harvard in the School of Public Health. This is 2016. And then was here for 5 years and then got called to serve in the Biden administration. So I spent the first 2 years serving, first doing COVID and then doing nutrition security. This picture was taken on my very last work trip in January, so about 9-10 months ago. And I'm at what's called a child and adult care feeding program. So it's a daycare where they're receiving food from USDA, which is the US Department of Agriculture. It had just been, this is San Francisco, right after the torrential rains that happened. So the rains have pretty much stopped, but it's still a little bit. So we're in this tiny house, which is the daycare center. And the kids are, they've got lots of energy, and the rain stops and we get to go outside and we found some hula hoops and we started hula hooping. But this picture, I love it because it was one of the things that was so great about the job is I got the opportunity to travel all around the country and see these programs come to life. And again, as someone who cares deeply about food nutrition policy and someone who has received these programs, it really was such an honor to be able to serve in this way. I just want to wrap by giving you a sense of, what are the things that really propel me forward? The things that I'm constantly thinking about are, am I doing good work? Can I do things differently? Am I giving back enough? What more can I do? Don't forget where I come from. Yes, I am of Harvard now, but I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I hail from inner city Baltimore. So what does that mean in terms of my obligation for the need to reach back and help others who come from similar cities or experiences? And then, don't be in a rush to become a fancy grown-up. I always say that I'm forever 29. And I think that it's really important to not rush this one wild and crazy life that we get. Finally, before going to the questions, I'm very inspired by quotes. I love English, and I love how people can just put the right words together to give you the right feeling. So these are 3 of my favorites. They are not the only ones, but I will just quickly read them to you because they have really been important motivations for me. So the first is Martin Luther King. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? The second is Maya Angelou, and frankly, it's hard to pick a favorite from her, but I do love this one, which is, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. My number one goal when I meet with someone is that they say to themselves when they walk away, I want to chat with Sara again. They may not remember a word that I said, but I want them to have enjoyed the conversation. And I consciously think about that all the time. And then finally, I have read a mountain of children's books with my little ones. And this final quote is from a great children's book, Rosie Revere Engineer. And it says, life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. And I think about this when I get frustrated or when I give up. So let me stop there. And I hope that was helpful background, and I look forward to questions.
Well, Sara, thank you so much for that incredible presentation. It was an amazing journey that you've had, and you've really brought it to life. And we have a long list of questions that are a little bit more thought through, but I'd really want to learn more about the hula hooping. But I think we'll kick it off with, can you please describe for this group a pivotal moment or experience in your career that profoundly shaped your perspective on leadership? You've talked us through so much, and you've brought it to life, and I think we all want to talk with you again. But talk to us a little bit about leadership. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And would just encourage those of you, if you have questions, start sticking them in the chat. But so what I would say is the key moment that I have learned about leadership actually is a really simple one that relates to communication. So one, I think, big challenge in public health, but also in academia, is that many people don't know how to take the knowledge and translate it to people who don't use big words and don't speak fancy language and don't speak in fancy ways. And so when I was at Hopkins and I would have studies come out, I made a big effort to try to not just be on NPR, but also to go on the FM stations. So one day, had a study came out the night that I'm on one of the FM stations, and I said, the radio host said to me, if you can leave one message with people, what is it? And I said, this was about obesity. And I said, you have to eat less and exercise more. If that's one thing I can tell you, this is it. The next morning, literally, I'm walking into my daughter's daycare. And to get in, you have to pass a security guard. This is at the Hopkins daycare. And I hear the security guard talking to her girlfriend. And she says, I heard it from the good doctor last night. If you want to lose weight, you have to eat less and exercise more. My take home from that is that words matter. And if you want to lead people, you have to meet them where they are, and you have to communicate in ways that are highly accessible. And I think I have never forgot about that moment. And I think about it all the time.
Sara, that's incredible. Thank you so much. As I hear you talk, one thing that I think is just extraordinary is the way you have made an impact in so many realms, in the realm of public health, academia, in government, in service, at Harvard. And as a leader, you've navigated these different sectors and have kind of brought together the public health knowledge, the policy knowledge, and now in your various leadership roles as Harvard. I'd like to hear a little bit about how do you kind of thread that needle, and how have you navigated that move between these sectors and industries, particularly as some of us here may also have kind of been thinking about that type of cross-industry career move, or maybe inspired by those elements of your own journey?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So number one, I would say an active question should always be, am I happy doing what I'm doing right now? And it's not something you ask when you take the job. It's something that you should just be asking yourself on a monthly basis. And some of it is course correction. There's something that's bothering me. Let me see if I can fix it. And some of it is, I am not in the right place. I have had the great fortune of always loving the jobs that I've been in. And I've also had the great fortune of serendipity. And so one thing I would encourage you all to be open to is opportunities are going to come along, and you can't always predict them. But you have to decide, is this the fork in the road where I start to go left? Or is this the time where I sort of stay the course? I'm sure almost everyone, or everyone listening, has said no to a job. And, life could be very different had you taken that job and not another one. The thing that I've always tried to do is ask myself two key questions. One, am I happy where I am? And two, if I take this new opportunity, have I shut off my ability to go back to where I was really happy? The beauty of an academic position is it gives you the flexibility to take leave and go into government and come back to your job. It is very different to do this when you're actually leaving a job, going to a new one, and you have to find one shortly after. That I'm somewhat risk averse. I'm not sure that I could do that, but I've been very fortunate that my base role has allowed me to pursue a variety of careers, which have been hugely rewarding. Now, at the same time, I've turned down a number of jobs where there is not a revolving door back. And by taking them, they would have constrained opportunities as opposed to opening up opportunities. And I would say that the main reason why Harvard has always been such a good fit for me as a doctoral student and then as a faculty member is I'm not one of these people that has always known exactly what I want to do. I've always known my North Star, which is how do you help historically underserved groups achieve a better quality of life? But the how has always shifted over time. And I like being in a place where there are many ways that I can achieve that goal.
Thanks so much for that. I'd love to kind of pivot over to being a mom. You pointed out that you're a single mom. You also pointed out that you've been traveling, you're across the country, you're doing a whole lot of things to, pull to have impact. Can you talk to us a little bit about, what that's like? How are you juggling everything? And for the audience, what are some of the key takeaways or insights that you can share with women who might be trying to balance children and career?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this question to the best of my ability. And I'm guessing many of you have a better answer because this is really hard. Like, it's very, very hard to have little kids, big kids, and try to also work at the same time. Big picture, I would say never apologize for being a mom. Never apologize for having a sick kid. Like, it happens. They are the priority when it happens, and other stuff is just going to have to wait. So that's one thing I would suggest. The second thing is just to constantly remind yourself that I honestly believe that you can do it all, but it all is about timing. There are jobs that I really want in federal government, which I just can't take right now because my kids are too little and it would require too much of my time. And that's just the reality. And I think that we all have to think about what are our constraints. So there are little like silly rules that I have set up to make it all more manageable. So for example, I have a babysitter that helps me 2 nights a week, and those are always non-consecutive nights. And I will not have a babysitter for more than 2, usually it's a Tuesday and a Thursday. Sometimes there's like it's a Tuesday and a Wednesday. But what I will never do is 3 consecutive nights out of the house. Why? Because usually it's not worth it. Like, do you really need to go to that extra dinner? Do you really need to take that one other trip? I actually think a silver lining of COVID is that you can zoom into a lot of things, which it wouldn't have been possible before. But I have always really limited travel. That it definitely upticked when I was a Fed. But I've ratcheted it back down now that I'm back at Harvard. But even when I was a Fed, like, it would not be, I would fly to California and come back the same day to try to, get back. Because it's really, when you're a single mom, it's really disruptive when you travel. And again, is it worth it? So I think it's critical to be thinking about what are the boundaries you can set up in your life that are going to allow you to, I'm not going to say balance, but I'll say sanity. That's going to give you your sanity. But then really importantly, if you are in a newish position, you need to let people know how to treat you. If you start responding to emails on Saturdays and Sundays from the beginning, and then you stop, then all of a sudden you look like you're not working so hard. But if you never respond on the weekends, people will not expect that of you. And I remember when I first got to Hopkins, I remember, I think someone said it to me, but I would work like 150% Monday to Friday. But on the weekends, people would not hear from me. And I remember someone once sent me an urgent email over the weekend that was not urgent, and I just ignored it and waited for Monday to come, and then I answered it. But you do have to tell people how to treat you, because these jobs all of our jobs are very intense, and they can suck up all the airspace if we let them. But we can't let them, because even if you don't have children now, even if you don't have older parents now, these things may come. Other demands on your time may come, or you may just want to bojangle and sit in bed and watch Netflix. That is your right. And so I just think it's really important to be conscious about what you need and then try to create the space for that.
Thank you, Sarah. This is really resonating with me. And I think it's so helpful, particularly for people who are kind of more junior in their career, who feel like I've got to go, I've got to get going, I've got to go and get going. But knowing, no, you need to set those boundaries so that you can do what's best for your life and for you and for your career, and kind of make it all work in the way that works for you. And I think particularly more junior people may kind of struggle about that. I think one thing that is so remarkable is, as you say, you can do that, and yet you are putting time into tremendously valuable work that helps so many people. And I know that a lot of us here are particularly interested in hearing as well about your new role as the Vice Provost for Special Projects at Harvard, and you were appointed to this wonderful position that I'm sure people would love to hear a bit about what that role is, and what has inspired you to accept it and do this work for Harvard.
Yeah, great question. So when I left Harvard to go into the Biden administration, and before that time, I was really getting more interested in academic leadership, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And there wasn't like a job that someone had where I thought, I want that job. And so when I was in the Biden administration, Harvard reached out about this new role that I have now. And I thought, now that sounds interesting. One of the main reasons I was really drawn to it is because the 2 roles prior to that, doing COVID and then doing nutrition security in the Biden administration, both of them had never existed before. So there was just a huge amount of white space for creativity. And this one is the same. It hadn't existed before. And this work is not unique to Harvard, but the way that we're going about it is somewhat unique to higher education. So let me just say a few words about what we're trying to do. So The Harvard released a report 18 months ago which really described our entanglements with slavery. It was not the first time that Harvard had gone down this path. So go back about 15 years, and an FAF professor named Sven Beckert taught a course in 2006 about Harvard and slavery. And that course, by the way, was inspired by the work of Dr. Ruth Simmons, who was then the president at Brown University. She was the first Ivy League president to begin exploring entanglements with slavery. Now, as you may know, she's a senior advisor to our president, Claudine Gay, on HBCU engagement. She is also a close personal friend of our former president, Larry Bacow, and helped inspire him to then commission the presidential report that came out 18 months ago. Now, that report really underlines three very difficult truths about Harvard's history. One is that Harvard has direct ties to slavery. So Harvard leaders, faculty, and staff enslaved more than 70 people that we know of in the 17th and 18th century. Two, Harvard has financial ties to slavery. So 5 men who made their fortunes in slavery and slave-produced goods contributed 1/3 of all private donations and pledges in the first half of the 19th century. And then finally, Harvard has intellectual ties to slavery. So in the 19th century and the 20th century, there were leaders here at the university, there were professors who were promoting ideas like race science, ideas around eugenics. These are things that have been debunked, but they underpin Jim Crow segregation. They also have driven, and for some continue to drive, white supremacy. So there's a very long tail of our legacy as it relates to slavery. I will just flag the other thing that the report does is it lifts up really powerful examples of resistance. So Black students at the time saying, no, you can't say that I can't be in the dorm because I'm Black. No, you can't say that I can't play football because I'm Black. So a piece of the work was 7 recommendations. One of those recommendations was to support this effort in perpetuity, and that was the creation of the $100 million endowment. And so my office is responsible for the implementation arm of this effort. So we've got a lot of different things in the works, but the big rocks are engagement with HBCUs, identification of direct descendants, and then engaging that population, honoring and engaging with Native Americans. And there's a conference coming up in November at Radcliffe on that topic, memorializing those who were enslaved, and just to honor that legacy. And that memorial will physically happen on the campus. And then doing what we do best, which is how do we advance educational excellence? And so there are many, many things that are in flight to support that work. We are building up the institutional muscle and would encourage you all, I'll try to stick the link in the chat, or if anyone knows the link, if you could drop it in the chat. There's the report, but there's the implementation website. And you can learn more about the work that we're doing. The one thing I will flag is that this fall semester, so in the not too distant future, we will be releasing a request for proposals, which is open to faculty, to staff, to students, to be able to apply for funds to help support this work. So encourage you all to do that if you're interested.
Well, thank you for that, because we were wondering, how can we help? How can we engage? And we will find the links, and we will certainly, it looks like they're in the chat. So thank you to Sherelle and Lisa, and we'll have those available for anyone who would like to engage. So thank you for that. In terms of, looking at, let's see. Sorry. In terms of looking at your work, emphasizing, I'm sorry. I want to go back to the chat, and somebody had asked one question about, suppose do you have advice for others who know the what they want, that they have advice? Do you have advice for others that know the what they want to accomplish, but not the how? So going back to that personal career journey.
Yep, that's a great question. I'm guessing that each of you, if someone said, all right, what's your big goal? What's your North Star? We can all talk at the 30,000 foot level. It's harder to think about, all right, well, then how do I execute on that? I think one of the really important things to always do is to chunk things. Otherwise, you quickly feel as if you're disappointing yourself, because you say, well, I'm going to, in my case, my North Star is help historically underserved people achieve a better quality of life. Okay, well, how am I going to do that? I think it's really important to talk to a lot of people, to ask them how they pursued their path. So for example, do you need a different degree? That is often not the answer, but sometimes it is. Do you need to do some shadowing experiences to figure out what it is that you do or don't want to do? Do you need to try a different job or try a different role at your job so you can try to hone in on what are the things that really bring you joy versus you don't really like them? So I think part of figuring out the how is giving yourself opportunity to have experiences, to talk to people that are a little bit farther ahead of you and learn from them. I will say that when I was a fellow, we had twice a week closed door conversations with pretty much every who's who in the administration. So the president, the vice president, key members of the press, the whole cabinet. And in those meetings, you could ask anything you wanted, which is why I encourage you all to ask anything you want. Like take the opportunity. I can honestly say that hearing what folks said shaved years of mistakes off my life, because people often will be very candid about, I wish I would have done this. I wish I hadn't done this. And it's super helpful. And the one thing that I heard more than anything was when you have a super busy job, it's okay to give yourself just one thing outside of work. And it's okay if that one thing is your kids and there's nothing else. In other words, you cannot do everything. And so what are you going to prioritize? And so I would say that to get to the how, it is a series of iterative conversations. Journal, ask yourself what's important, but just keep going back to trusted advisors and then keep asking yourself, okay, well, if I do this, is this going to take me in the direction that I want to go? Or do I need to shift a little bit and try something else? I hope that answers your question. It was a bit of a long-winded answer.
And we certainly invite everyone to chime in with questions.
Yes, and I
And-
see, oh,
Yeah. No,
okay. No, I was gonna say, I see Angela has her hand raised.
Hello. I don't know if we're going to continue with the recording of the chat or the question and answer portion. So I just wanted to, if people have some questions that they don't want on record, I think we're going to shut the recording down. But I'll